Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lanbrew podcast. I'm Sean Tyler, and it's just me today. Later on, I want to redo this podcast with Nikhil so we can get a little discussion going. But for today, it's just going to be me, and we're talking about the new 2016 MacBook Pro, because I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably saw Apple's announcement, or you've gone on their website and checked it out, or seen the tons of hate around the internet for it. I myself have been looking at maybe purchasing a MacBook Pro. I know some people who have already pre-ordered one. I've definitely been waiting to see what the refresh was going to be all about. I've had a MacBook Pro 13-inch from 2000, since 2009, the end of 2009, started 2010, and I love that thing. That thing has served me well through all over the world, through grad school. It's still running strong. So I was definitely looking forward to the refresh, and I'll start this out with saying that I am disappointed. I'm in the camp with the people that probably won't be buying one, but we'll get to that in a second. So I want to start in with some pros and cons of the new MacBook Pro. So we'll start with the pros. And this is for the 15-inch. I'm not going to talk about the 13-inch or why Apple was comparing or putting down their own products in their presentation, meaning they were comparing the new 13-inch with the MacBook Air and trying to destroy the MacBook Air like it was a competitor, which was very strange. Anyway, we're talking about the 15-inch, and I'm talking about like the highest spec of the 15-inch. So let's start in with the pros. So the first pro is they have the nice new thin display. Yes, the display looks beautiful, and yes, it's really thin. However, and we'll get to this later, it's a glossy display, and Apple is known for that. So the next thing I have is the quad-core i7. So you can get up to 2.9 gigahertz, which is even overclockable. You can overclock that thing, I think, up to like 3.5 gigahertz. But yeah, it's a quad-core i7. It's the 6th gen, which everyone's complaining about, that it's not like the newest version of the i7, Intel i7. But if you do a quick search around the internet, the highest-end laptops you can get right now, with the exception of paying like really through the teeth, they're all running on the 6th gen, so I think that's kind of a moot argument. Graphics card wise, you can get a Radeon Pro 460 GPU. That's the highest you can get, with 4 gigabytes of RAM on the GPU. Anyway, it has 4 USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports. That's on of course, the 15-inch most expensive model. It has a headphone jack, which is crazy that I even have to say that, Apple. It has up to 10 hours of battery life, and it has a touch bar, which, if you haven't seen the touch bar, it's this OLED strip running across the top of your keyboard where the function keys used to be. And it changes with whatever application you're using, and it changes while you're in the application. So it changes depending on the task that you're doing, which is kind of a cool idea, but at the same time, it's a whole nother thing that I'm going to have to learn. I don't know what shortcuts are going to be popping up. I'm going to have to move my eyes down to the touch bar anytime I want to use it. And that's assuming that I'm not going to have the MacBook Pro docked at my desktop, hooked up to multiple monitors, which I think a lot of developers and designers are going to be using their MacBook Pros that way. They're going to have it docked at their desktop most of the time, hooked up to their displays, not even touching the touch bar, which in their presentation, they showed your Mac sitting in the middle of like 2 displays on the left and right, which I don't know anybody who works that way. Maybe a few of you do, but I certainly don't. And the people that I know that have pre-ordered these things, they definitely don't work that way. They dock, they close their lid, and they hook it up to their displays, and they never touch the keyboard in there. They never touch the touchpad in there. and they're never going to touch the touch bar. So why are you paying $500 to $1,000 more for something you're never going to touch? That makes no sense to me. And that leads us into the cons. So the RAM is only up to 16 gigabytes, and it's soldered on. You cannot upgrade the RAM. Once you've made a decision on your RAM, that's the decision you're going to live with for the life of your MacBook Pro. The front-facing camera is only 720p. What are you talking about? 720p. It is 2016. And there's no... If you go on the tech specs or whatever on their website, it only just says, yeah, front-facing camera, 720p. Doesn't tell you why. Doesn't tell you any more specs about it. I think that's crazy. The GPU that I mentioned, the Radeon Pro 460 GPU, that's a mediocre card when we're talking about like flagship cards for these companies, meaning NVIDIA versus ATI, AMD ATI, or ATI AMD. That's a mediocre card when you're comparing it to like the 1060, which you can get in some other laptops, the NVIDIA 1060. They've also gotten rid of the MagSafe charger, which, for all who don't know, that was the little magnet charger that plugs in, that is your power charger for your MacBook Pro or any of your Macs, your MacBooks. And if you stepped on the charger, it would pop out to keep your device from flying off the table and crashing on the floor. And I'm sure most of you have loved the MagSafe charger. I've definitely loved it. I've stepped on my charger I don't know how many times and been very thankful that thing was a magnet and popped right out. Right. So the 4 Thunderbolt ports, which are also USB-C. So those are, when we're talking about the Thunderbolt 3 ports, that's interchangeable with USB-C for the most part. And you get 4 on the most expensive model. So if you watch tech videos on YouTube, you probably know who MKBHD is. He brought up a very good point when he was talking about this. USB-C is the future. It's awesome. It's like a universal port that once everything has it, we're only going to have to carry around one cable to interface with anything for charging, for connecting to displays, yada, yada, so on and so forth. That's great for the future. Right now, you can sit inside of my office that I have tons of computers. You can turn 360 degrees and be surrounded by computers and monitors and peripherals and drawers full of cables. I don't own one thing that hooks up to USB-C. And yes, I'm going to have to invest in the future and in things that hook up via USB-C, but that's not now. It's like Apple's telling us that HDMI is somehow a thing of the past along with the headphone jack, which they include on this device but not on their iPhone 7. Also, there is no direct way, if you bought an iPhone 7 and then you bought the newest MacBook Pro 2016, there is no direct way to hook up to your MacBook Pro with your iPhone 7. You need an adapter. So if you're good with that, if you're good with living this new Mac adapter lifestyle, by all means, don't even listen to these cons that I have for as far as connectivity ports. Also, like I mentioned, they have the glossy screen, but that's been a part of Apple for a long time, and a lot of other companies have glossy screens. And for all of you who don't know what I'm talking about, if you look at your screen and you can see your reflection in it, that's what I'm calling a glossy screen. You can get some beautiful colors, and it definitely enables touch displays, which this is not a touch display. Apple's not offering a touch display. Their touch bar is their way that you're going to interact with their system. I can't stand it. I've lived with it on my MacBook Pro for the past 7 years or whatever. But now that I'm at the point where I can move on from it, and even my work laptop doesn't have a glossy display. It has a matte finish, or not finish, but it's a matte screen. It's a flat matte screen, I love that thing. I can look at it and I don't see my reflection. If you sit in a dark room, you don't really notice it. But if you sit in a room that has lights, which is most places, you're definitely going to see your reflection, and it's pretty distracting for me. So all of that I've mentioned, if we go with the 512 solid state gig model for the hard drive, that is a price tag of $3,100. $3,100. Let's do some comparing. If you go with a Dell XPS 15, which is kind of their flagship work laptop. Oh, and all of these laptops that I'm going to mention are around 4 pounds, so I'm not factoring in the weight here. If you go with Dell's, the XPS 15, and this is their highest price tag of $2,550, you get 32 gigs of RAM, you get an i7 quad-core CPU, you get a 1 terabyte solid-state drive for your hard drive, you get a GTX 960M, which is a pretty good card. It's kind of the model before the new 10 series, but it's still a great card. That only goes up to 2 gigabytes of RAM on that GPU. It's a 4K display, but it's glossy. And here are your ports. You get an SD card reader, you get 2 USB 3.0 ports, an HDMI port, a Thunderbolt 3 port, and a headphone jack. Okay, so that's Dell's flagship. The other laptop that I want to bring up next is the new 2016 Razer Blade laptop, and we're going to be talking about their best model at $2,700. So Dell's, just to recap, was $2,550 for their best model, and Razer's best model is $2,700. You get an i7 quad-core CPU, you get a GTX 1060 with 6 gigs of RAM on the GPU, you get 16 gigs of RAM, you get a 1 terabyte solid-state drive, you get a 4K 14-inch display, which I don't really like, but I mean, you could live with like the losing the extra inch. And here are your ports. You get 1 Thunderbolt 3 port, an HDMI port, and 3 USB 3.0 ports, plus a headphone jack. And again, it's crazy that I have to mention that you get a headphone jack. Okay. Also, the Razer actually offers a cheaper option for your display. It only goes up to 1080 for this thing I'm about to mention, but you can get the matte display, the flat matte display. You don't have to have a glossy one, and it's not touch. Oh, if you get the and I'll have to look if the Dell XPS. I think it is their XPS 15. I think it's a touch screen, but the Razer, if you go with the flat matte screen, it's not touch. So here are some questions you need to ask yourself if you're even thinking about getting a MacBook Pro. So what are you using this for? Are you going to be video editing? Are you gaming? Are you podcasting? What's your daily driving task that you're going to be doing on this thing? Next, do you really need to be able to do these tasks in a coffee shop? Meaning, can you spend less money on your laptop and invest more in your desktop? Do you have to be on the run when you're video editing? I do know some people that want to be able, Nikhil, for instance, he wants to be able to take his laptop anywhere and edit video. So, this may be a viable option. And I'll stop here and mention that the touch bar is pretty cool in Final Cut Pro for video editing. You can actually scrub through your timeline while you're editing video, which is cool, but I can also do that with my mouse. Okay, moving on. Why do you need OS X? Are you working inside of Final Cut? Are you just a fanboy? Have you grown up using Mac? Have you, as a designer or developer, switched over to Mac and that's what you have to work inside of? And if you have to use OS X, why can't you have a desktop? Or for people who really want to save some money, can you build a Hackintosh? Also, do you really think you're going to use the touch bar? Like I mentioned, are you just going to dock this thing at your desktop and never open the lid? If your answer to that is yes, why are you investing in the touch bar? Also, can you live and I've mentioned this, can you live in this new Mac adapter lifestyle? It seems like they want you to have an adapter for everything. The new iPhone 7, removing the headphone jack, comes with an adapter to add the headphone jack, which we're still asking ourselves, what if I want to charge it and listen to music at the same time through my headphones that don't connect through Lightning, which is a different port than Thunderbolt 3? And finally, do you have anything in your home office or on your person or in your laptop bag that hooks up to USB-C or, Thunderbolt 3? Do you have any of those devices, or are all of your peripherals running through Bluetooth at this point? Even Apple has said that their AirPods are not ready for the market. A thing that they touted as being the future that's here now, they have come out and said, we're still working it out, right? So it's almost extortion. They've taken away, yes, there are other options. It's not fully extortion. They've taken away the headphone jack, they've created a problem, and then solved it with a solution that they've even admitted isn't the best solution. So, anyway, I digress. One point about the last question that I asked. If you have a mouse, a wireless mouse, does it have does it have Bluetooth, or does it only hook up over its own little dongle that comes with it? If it only hooks up with this little dongle, you need to go on Amazon and buy yourself an adapter. So anyway, as you can see, I have some strong opinions about this new MacBook, and to be frank, I'm totally disappointed in Apple for what they've been touting over this past year. I'm not into the hype over really anything that they've released. The only thing that I'm psyched about is the update for the iWatch, which I'm not even going to buy one of those really. But I mean, it was cool what they did with it. It should have been done way sooner than when they're doing it. And I want a refresh of the Mac Mini. Why did they take away quad-core Mac Minis? That makes no sense to me. I guess they're pushing you into buying, other devices. But I also read this really great article, and maybe I'll link it in the description of wherever I post this. But someone was asking the question, or not asking the question, but making the statement that Apple has pretty much admitted that they don't know who the Mac is for anymore. It used to be for developers and designers. But now, if you're offering mediocre systems, I'm a designer. I'm not going to buy a MacBook Pro, because it's not pro. It's not for my professional lifestyle. Or not lifestyle, but my professional setting. I need something that has more ports than what they're giving me right now in this environment. Yes, the future is going to be different. And I need better computing power for my money. What you're asking me to pay $3,100, I can go to Dell, pay $2,550, and get twice the specs in some instances. That makes no sense from a buying decision. So anyway, I'm just here to throw out some other options, the Dell and the Razer, and there are definitely plenty of other laptops out there that you can look into if you don't want to be inside the Mac ecosystem and bowing down to whatever Mac shoves in your face and tells you how to use their product. Okay, enough of my rant. Personal decision. My advice to you, don't buy the new MacBook Pro. The Touch Bar is a gimmick, and don't be sucked in. So anyway, we'll pick up this conversation with Nikhil here in the future for our next podcast after A New Hope, after we sit down and continue our franchise series. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to buy one. Let's get a discussion going. I think it's a waste of money, and I think you can spend your money on other options and get a better product. But anyway, thanks for listening. Again, I'm Sean Tyler, and we'll catch you in the next one.